Good morning. This is Randy Menton, and today what I want to talk to you about is the Chapter 4 information on forecasting. Now, what you're looking at here is a budget, and this is a budget that I created, I don't know, a long time ago. And um, what I did was I said, let's use three different parts or three different products. In this case, we have a bout here with a baled cover on it or lid on it. Same thing over here, just a different size. And this is just a lid. And sometimes you could, if you had certain environments, you could use just the lid. And these are all products that are made out of plastic. Now, with plastics, in this case, you have a different kind of plastic that goes into the body of this versus the cap. The cap is a harder plastic. This has to be much more flexible because it's going in, up and down. And as you go up and down, you have wear and tear on it versus just screwing and unscrewing something here as you would be doing with this. Now, even though I call this a budget, all a budget is a 12-month forecast. If we were looking at forecasting out beyond 12 months, then that would be different. But in our situation here, what we're doing is we're budgeting for around 6 months anyway. So, and forecasting for 6 months. So there's really not a difference. Um, both in terms of the budget, this is something we say we have to stay within, but the budget and the forecast come from the same information. In other words, if I'm going to have faith in something as a budgetary amount, then that would be the same amount that I would have forecast for that period of time. Okay, so let me just kind of pop through and let me show you a couple of things here. Now, all of this income statement here, and that's one of the things that we have to be able to generate in a forecast. The first number that we have to be concerned with is the sales number. So if you're in a meeting and you are in a forecasting meeting, the very first thing you're going to do is budget your sales. And, it sounds pretty simple, but it really isn't. And I'm going to pop over to the sales forecast budget, whichever one you want to call it. And let me just kind of show you what happens. Well, you're going to start the year with a certain amount of beginning inventory. And this isn't, these are not sales. This is the beginning inventory of product that you have to sell. And down here, these will be the numbers that would have been generated from, or we anticipate would be generated from that beginning inventory. And of course, it's going to be um, from the beginning inventories from last year. So I would use the unit prices that I've developed down here from last year. Okay, so these are our starting prices. Now, when you think about forecasting or budgeting, whichever one you're talking about, you're going to build in certain price changes based upon what the market is telling you, or based upon the goals that you have for the market. Excuse me. In this case, what we're saying is that product A, we're going to try to get a price change of about 2%. Product B, 1%. Product C, we're not going to get a price upward change. We're going to actually have to discount that particular product. Now, why might that happen? Well, I've got some additional competition, for example. Maybe I have somebody from overseas that is now impacting my market. So it could be any different number of things. Um, and then product D, I don't expect any change from product D. And then product E again, I'm expecting a 2% increase. So that's reflected in the restated unit price. So since this is a budget or a forecast, what I would do is I would use the restated unit price at the very beginning of the year. So in other words, my January numbers would have the new restated unit price, whereas the beginning inventory would have the old prices. I hope that makes sense to you. Um, and then from there, we have to, excuse me, we have to generate our monthly numbers, our monthly forecasting numbers. And so I've done that for the first product. And what I did was I said, look, all of these products are going to have um, the same basic um, anticipated numbers going forward. So in other words, if I said the product A was going to have a 2% increase, then I'm saying that product B, C, and so forth will also have that 2%. Would we really do that in the real world? No, we wouldn't. We would look at those at each one of those products individually, but I don't need to do that here because it's very time consuming to do it. We also have here, notice that we have January through December forecasted sales numbers for product A, and we'll fill in the blanks for the other ones. And then I have the ending inventory. So the way that this works is I'm going to forecast my yearly sales, January through December. I'm going to subtract the beginning inventory and I'm going to add my desired ending inventory. And what that's going to give me is my production. In other words, what I'm anticipating is that I'm going to have this many units that I'm going to produce in the month of January, less this group here, because I've already got this. This is already in-house. So I don't need to produce 40,000. I only need to produce 5,000 if I don't want to build any inventory. Well, in this case, I still want to build ending inventory because I've got ending inventory back on this end. So essentially, I'm going to have some reduction along the way for the beginning inventory, but I'm going to pick up some stuff toward the end at the ending inventory. So I'll build that into my monthly numbers as I go. All right. So again, because I have chosen to use the same computations all the way along the way. So if I look at June, for example, I'm saying that June is going to be equal to May's number minus 1%. And if I look at April, I said that April is going to be equal to March's number minus 2%. February is January's number plus 3%. Now, why would that be done? Well, you're doing that because no 2 months are created equal. So, in other words, when you think about this, if I would anticipate, I would anticipate that there are going to be cycles to sales. In other words, maybe February is normally a good month for me. Why? Well, okay. Let's just say, for example, that this happened to be a product. It's not in this case, but say it happened to be a product that um, was in, was valuable around Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day is February the 14th. So I would maybe anticipate that I would have some increases in sales in February. And then when I get over here to April, well, not much is happening in April, potentially. When I come over here to September, September again, typically, September starts the period of time in for most companies, for most retailers in particular, that starts the time when they expect these increases because everybody's going back to school and all of that sort of thing. Okay. Anyway, all of those have some number associated with them, either a plus or a minus versus the previous month. And again, you would look at this, if you were in business, you would look at this very carefully and, you know, and say, well, when is Mother's Day? When is Father's Day? When is Christmas? And all of those sorts of things that would impact your sales for those months. And so I'm just going to bring those down because I'm assuming again that they're all working the same way. So if this one was a 3% increase. This would be a 3% increase, and this would be a 3% increase. As you can see up here in the formula bar, I have F8, that's this guy, times 1.03. So you see that that number has increased from 125,000 to 128,750. Now, again, the selling prices are down here. So all I'm doing is I'm multiplying product C for February times product C selling price um, for that we've restated based upon our increases that we plan to get, or decreases, depending. And so in this case, I expect $750,059 in February sales. Okay. And so the way that this is supposed to work, I hope that it works this way. Um, when I look at my January sales here of $2,818,325, if I come back over to the master budget, I see $2,818 and um, um, I mean $2,818,325. So uh, and that would have been true for all of them. Now at this point, I don't have cost of goods sold in here yet. Okay, and so the way that I would get to my cost of goods sold is I have to consider three different things. And as you walk through chapter 4 of your book, you'll see that that's what they're talking about. They're talking about materials, labor, which would be this tab, and um, then going forward, we'll have factory overhead. Okay, so if I click on the factory overhead, I see that that's what we were anticipating for factory overhead. I will point out one thing to you, just so that you can see it. Most most companies that we deal with here on this level, at the um, at the baccalaureate level, we talk mostly about direct labor and the impact that overhead has versus direct labor. Well, I have to tell you that in today's world, that's really not accurate anymore. There are so many more automation considerations that we have versus, several years ago, that it wouldn't be unusual to see us talking about the overhead cost related to a particular machine hour. So in this case, when I'm looking at overhead, I don't get too far ahead of myself, but in this case, it takes um, less than a second to produce product A. The cost per hour for product A is $50. And of course, you have different numbers here because we have different machines. Some machines are more expensive than others. Going back to the materials budget, if I look down through here, I see that I have this polypropylene cap in a molding operation. The usage is, a quarter of an ounce or quarter of a pound or whatever we're looking at. And here's your cost. Okay. Now, then I have, in this case, a restated cost based upon the usage. So, in other words, here's my raw cost. Here's my usage. If I multiply this times this, I get this. So, in other words, every time I make product A, um, I have a cost here, at least on the body. This is the body of it. As I showed you before, you have a body, you have a cap. This is the body. And so it cost me about 17 cents to produce the body for product A. And then I come over here and I look at or I guess this is the cap, I'm sorry. This is the cap, this is the body. Okay, 6 and 1. This is the amount that polyethylene that it costs for me to make the body. Well, polyethylene, of course, is more flexible than polypropylene. And so you're multiplying this times this to get to this. So the total cost here is 37 cents. And it's actually more, or it's actually different than that. So that if I increase the decimals, you'll see that it comes out to 0.36975, and honestly, that would be pretty important when you actually make your calculations. And I don't know whether you know or not, but even if I've rounded this up or taken some of the decimals out in Excel, it still sees the decimal. In other words, if that were a repeating decimal that went on for a long time, that would be what it would use. Okay. So just be aware that even though it says 37 cents here, it's actually that longer decimal that you thought, 36,975. That's the actual amount that's going to be multiplied times your production. Okay. Now, again, I would get this number for the estimated beginning inventory and the desired ending inventory. Well, where would it come from? Well, it's going to come from your sales budget over here. So the beginning inventory is 105,000 units. I mean, excuse me, up here, your units, 35,000 units. That's the number that we're going to look at. Okay. So if I go back over to my direct materials budget, all right, I'm going to look at what my actual estimated beginning inventory is, and I'm going to multiply that times this total cost over here for the material. Okay. All right. So I'm looking at cost over here. I'm not looking at the units. So if I'm going to get that number, what I would do is I would say that it would be equal to this number here times, and then go back over to my sales budget, and I'm going to pick up this number here from the beginning inventory. Boom. That is the estimated beginning inventory in materials for product A. Since since I'm going to be going right down the list here for each one of these products, all I have to do then is drag this number down, and it's automatically going to pick up. If I look at this, I can see that it's P13. P13, here's P, here's 13. So I'm getting 52 cents, and I'm getting the sales budget from E10. So if I look at over here, the sales budget, this is E, this is 10. So all I did was I just used a relative reference to get to this number. Okay. Now, what is going on with February here? And sales. I don't know why that did that. Let me see here. Equal um, 37 cents times. Go back to the sales budget for February. Pick up this guy. And anyway, whatever it was doing, that's the way we'll fix it. Okay. Oh, I know what. I know what. Okay. Let me back up here. Because I'm going to use these numbers over and over and over again, what I have to do is I have to have P9 as an absolute reference, like that. And then I have to do this once. I don't have to do it every single time. And F4. F4 gives you an absolute reference. And then P11, I just need to make that into an absolute. So then every time, in other words, every time I'm doing product C small, I'm using this 38 cents over here. And the same thing with the rest of them. And last but not least, here's P13. F4 that, and enter. And now I should be able to drag this all the way across. And notice that I have some hashtags down here, and all that means is that I need to expand the size of those cells because there's not enough room in the cell to accommodate the number. I think you can do this all at once, by the way, in one step, but I don't know what that step is right off the top. I can't remember what it is. And I'm just coming up here to the intersection and just double clicking it. And that gives me all of that. Desired ending inventory is going to be the same basic thing. I'm going to go over here and get this equal to the cost of this item times going back to the sales budget and picking up the ending inventory. And this one I can easily drag down, not a problem. Okay, and then finally, the total, when I'm thinking about the total here, um, in terms of inventory, what I'm going to do is I'm going to equal the sum of all of these from January all the way over to the ending inventory, close parentheses, minus the beginning inventory. And that's the total expenditure that we're going to have for that particular group of products in terms of cost of goods sold. Okay. Now, again, when I come back over here to the sales budget, you notice, excuse me, master budget over here. When I come over here, you notice that it's cost of goods sold. So I have to do materials, labor, and overhead to get to those numbers. Okay. So we've done materials now. There's your materials budget and direct labor. We'd have to come over here and say, well, here's the cost. We didn't anticipate any change in the cost of labor. And why not? Well, we said we weren't going to give an increase this year. It's really that simple. Okay. And so if I look at this one now, what I have to do is I have to say that G5, that's this guy, okay, is an absolute. And the sales budget that we're coming up with is a relative reference. So if I change this here to an absolute reference by F4ing it, and then go to the next one and do the same thing, you only have to do it once. And then the same thing on down the line. Oops. Uh-oh. Let me back up here. Escape. Got carried away there. G7, F4. And I'm coming to the end of the string here. And I didn't do that before and I got kind of messed up. Here's G8. And again, F4. Go to the end of the string and hit enter. And here, G9. Same thing. F4. End of the string. Hit enter. Okay. So now all I have to do is just come through here and grab all of these and drag them across. And it'll populate all of those. For the beginning inventory, I have to go back and get it. And typically now I would go ahead and use these numbers instead of these because this is the cost before any estimated change. It's just a good habit to be in to do it properly. So this is equal to this number here times going back over to the sales budget, this number here. And the same thing through right on down. And then I have to come down here to the, oops, let me get rid of the screen recorder here. I have to come down to the desired ending inventory. It'll be the same thing, except that In this case, we're going to use the new number because if we had an increase, we'd want to use what we're currently experiencing versus what we experienced last year, right? So times the sales budget over here for the ending inventory. Boom. And then we're going to drag that down. The computation is the same as it was before. It's equal the sum of all of the months plus the desired ending inventory minus the beginning inventory. This guy. And now that number, bringing it down. Okay. So let me back up here to the materials budget for a minute, because what we didn't do is we didn't actually total these up on the bottom. Okay. Because each one of these needs to be total because we have January cost of goods sold, February cost of goods sold, and so forth. And that's nothing more than just a auto sum. Up here you see the auto sum button. Hit enter, and then we'll just drag that across. And so we see that, by the way, that the total cost of material here is going to be, um, well, I need to bring this down. Okay, like that, so that I make sure that I'm subtracting that beginning inventory. And so these numbers here will go into a cost of sales sheet. This is the cost of sales sheet. We haven't done anything with it yet. Um, and so we're at 27 minutes. Now I'm going to just go, want to finish up the direct labor budget and the material, I mean, the cost, excuse me, the factory overhead budget. And then I'll be done with this section because I don't want it to get too large. And again, all I'm doing is just adding them up. This one I'm going to bring down. And I usually do a thing called, this is what we call footing. Okay, when we just add numbers up. And we want to go back through here and cross put them as well. Okay, to make sure that we're good. So this is going to be equal to the sum of all of these, close parentheses, minus the beginning inventory. And now you notice that these two are the same, and I can come over here because, sometimes for people who don't see the numbers all that well, or this big number, you just make it simple. This number minus this number should be 0. And it's 0 because there's nothing showing up here. So we know that that is both footed and cross-footed. And so we can have some confidence in that number. All right, so here's your factory overhead. And I can make the assumption that if we want to, that we're going to have a change in the estimated cost. Okay, so if I say the estimated change here is 0.02 up, and this one is 0.03 up, and this one is minus 0.02 down. This one has no change, and this one has an upside of 3%, 0.03. The new machine hour cost then will be this plus this. So it'll be equal to this plus this number times this number. times this. And the new one is 51. And then we just drag them on down. And then the cost per unit is going to be this times the new cost per unit, machine hours. So this times this. So 11 cents. And down here like that. And we did the same thing over here. We just use the same numbers. I'm going to control C it, and I'm just going to paste those up over here. Control V. And now the new one is going to be equal to this number plus this number times this number. And there you go. We went from 66 up to 67.32. Bring it on down. If we did it correctly, we see that 69 and 69, it's still the same number, so we didn't change any of that. So that would indicate to us, and the same thing down here, 52 and 52, that indicates to us that the math is right. Okay, we want to always check our math, even if it's on here. We want to check the math because you never know, right? Unless you check to be certain. And this, of course, is going to be the new machine hours um, times, the old machine hours times the new rate. And of course, that can change as well. This could change based upon maybe if we get a new machine or the old machine is not producing like it used to, it can maybe take more hours than it did before. So anyway, so that's the cost per unit for each of those. And then we're going to get the totals over here. The same thing we did in the previous one. I just didn't have it listed out for you in this one. That's the same exact thing. This is going to be equal to this plus this. And then drag each one of those down. And so notice that this one before would have been exactly the same as it was before. Nothing changed on it. Okay. All right. And now we're going to go back and we're going to do the same thing that we did before. This is going to be equal to this number here times back to the sales budget and get this number for beginning inventory. And then you're going to drag that down. Okay. Wait a minute. What did I forget? Well, I'll tell you what I didn't do. I didn't have a space here for the old cost, the old cost. So consequently, these numbers are not right. This is actually going to be equal to the, it's going to be actually equal to this number here. I'll just open up parentheses, this times this, close parentheses, plus this times this. May not be much of a difference. It actually probably will be if you start looking at increasing your decimal. Notice this is 2552 and this is 26. And I know that doesn't sound like much, but when you're producing hundreds of millions of these things, if you were, then it would certainly mean something. So let's just see if this changed anything. 911064. So if I'm going to say equal this number now times the sales budget of 35,000. And you see that it actually did make a difference. which is, of course, what I anticipated that it would do. Now we can go back and say that we're going to make this number here the absolute reference with an F4 times, go back to the sales budget, pick up this number, and we'll have to do that for each one of these, of course, all right, because this number here changes. Once you have established the absolute reference of it, then you only, like I say, you only have to do it once um, to get there, but you have to do it. Otherwise, your number won't be right. And go back and get the 50,000 and then equal. Now you go down, drop down one, F4 it times the sales budget number, 125, and then equal this number with an absolute reference times the sales budget number of this 200,000, and then one more equal this is an absolute reference times your sales budget number of this. And there you go. Now we can drag this all the way over. I'm not sure. Let me go back to the sales. I think we could probably do it. Yeah, the ending inventory, I can do it with the ending inventory as well. So I'll bring it one more time. Okay. And now my total, of course, is going to be equal to the sum of January through the desired ending inventory minus the beginning inventory. Boom. And then drag this down. And now we want to total it up. And again, notice that all of these are bad. So, what I might do is I might just come up here and increase the size of all of these cells. So if I come over here and just highlight everything and then right click and uh, format cells. And oops, what did I do here? Let's do it this way. Column width. Column width is 989. So if I make it 11. Now let's see if that fixes it. And it does. And so I can do the column width on all of these others and change them all to 11. And it should take care of it. Okay. Again, I want to make sure that everything adds up properly. So I'm going to do that. And then coming up with 2.41. And then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to make sure that I'm right by saying that's equal to the sum of all of these guys minus the beginning inventory. And notice that you'll see that this is always the case. We're going to have um, the desired ending inventory in all of the months that we have for sales, the anticipated sales, and then we'll subtract the beginning inventory. And of course, again, if you had big numbers over here, it's always good just to make certain that you don't have a mistake. And one minus the other should give you 0, which it does, so we're good to go. All right, so now, lastly, we want to have over here in our master budget, we want a cost of goods sold. And the cost of goods sold is going to be equal to, go to the materials budget and pick up this number, plus go to the direct labor budget, pick up this number, plus go to the direct labor overhead budget and pick up this number and enter. And that's your number for the cost of goods sold. Drag it across. Boom. And then this is an automatic calculation here. So your gross profit is 2155169. And that completes the top part. And you're going to do something very similar when you are creating your budget. Now, I just will, one last thing as I go through here, let me just show you. Um, we have that cost of sales budget, and what we could do, and what I should have done, I suppose, instead of doing it the way I did it, was just create the cost of goods sold that adds all these three things together. And I'll probably go back and do that in the next session. Selling expenses, administrative expenses, other income and expenses, all of these things, cash budget, capital budget, break even analysis. I'll show you how to do every one of those because all of that stuff, especially break even analysis and your cash budget, those are going to be things that you're looking at in great detail in upcoming chapters, as well as this chapter, of course. So hopefully this will help you understand how this stuff gets put together in the real world. And this is, I mean, I used to do cost budgeting as that was what I did for a living. So I understand how all this stuff actually works in the real world. And so what I'm doing is giving you some real world examples here of how to put all this stuff together. And again, we're stopping at this point with the master budget, having done our cost of goods sold, which is a significant portion of it. And then next time we'll go back through, I'll create the cost of goods sold sheet that accumulates it all, and then I'll bring it straight from that sheet instead of bringing it one at a time from each one of those. Um, it'll work out the same, but it might be a little bit easier for you to understand how all these things get accumulated. So that will do it for this session, and there'll be more sessions posted at a later point. Thank you.